When I was a kid, I never understood what was missing in Western superhero cartoons. Like, yeah, they were superpowered and they fight and all that, but I always got the feeling that the fights weren't the big deal that they are supposed to be in a show like that. Take for example Teen Titans, Ben 10. I loved these shows as a kid. But even back then, I felt like the fights weren't really interesting like they're supposed to be. It was because I knew nobody was gonna die, and that there wouldn't be even any blood on screen. How can you get excited for a fight when you know the stakes are low as they can be? Plus, there's the budget, right? You can't just animate some crazy fight on a Saturday morning cartoon budget. And that becomes a problem when the whole point of a show like that is to have superpowered people fighting. But Japan has managed to find a brilliant solution to all of these problems. They created what we call power systems. Hey, I'm Lou, and I'm here to help you write your webcomic. Something funny about making action comics is that most of the problems I just mentioned still apply to you. Most platforms still don't want too much violence in their content, and you are not going to kill off your main cast randomly. Plus, drawing fights and conveying emotion in a panel-by-panel format is even harder than animating it on a Saturday morning cartoon budget. That's why the manga industry came out with a genius way of having exciting fights and hype moments without needing to animate every frame and draw every punch. With the power system, you can make an exciting fight happen in which no one even moves. If you use this writing tool correctly, you can make the most emotional fight ever created without even having to draw a single attack on the page. A power system is basically a set of rules that a story has for its characters' superpowers. In Western media we have classic iconic examples like Kryptonians having powers because of the yellow sun of Earth, but when they're exposed to kryptonite, they become weak and unable to do anything. That's basically what a power system is, but the difference between Western superhero comics and Japanese manga is that in manga, the power systems tend to be excruciatingly developed. Like in the best ones, someone could write an entire manifesto full of rules and requirements for the powers in the comic to work. The reason for power systems being such a good way of conveying fights in comics is because it makes the rules clear, and now the reader can know exactly what to expect and understand immediately what's going on in the fight, without having to see movement going on. Because as we established, conveying a lot of fast movements using static images can be very complicated and time consuming. Like, it's a way of making fights compelling even though it's just a bunch of text. But adding a power system to your story can also be risky, because if you add too many rules and get lost in the details of your system, it will be hard for people to get into the story, since the mechanics of the fights are too complex. I myself dropped a few comics because the power system was just too obnoxious. I couldn't get immersed anymore, you know? You don't want to indulge too much on your own systems and rules, but also you cannot be too loose with it, because if there are not enough rules and systems in place for the fights, it's like you don't even have a power system in the first place. A good power system isn't just an arbitrary set of rules for the punching to happen. It's something that ties into the themes of the story and the characters' personalities in a natural way. It's like a way of mechanizing and showing through stats and numbers what the character and attack is all about. A way to nerdify the world. And if you're going for that battle shonen type of show, the power system will be one of the biggest factors to set your work apart from the others, because it is the defining feature of a lot of shonen. Let's now see a few examples of great power systems and how they work. Yeah, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is pretty much expected when talking about power systems, right? Stands are just so iconic and just so overall cool that it's hard to not think about them when talking about the best power systems in shonen. It's probably one of my personal favorites of all time. Basically, a stand is a reflection of your soul. It's literally your ghost projecting out of your body to punch people in the face. And since they reflect your true nature and personality, they can come in infinite shapes and sizes. And I mean infinite shapes and sizes. Like there are the regular humanoid ones that punch and scream, sure, but there are also stands which are masks, yellow goo, paper, a giant boat. Yeah, this character's true personality and soul has the shape of a boat. Jotaro's stand, without spoiling anything, is just a regular punching purple man. But because it is so basic, its punches hit really hard and he is really fast. This represents how stoic and direct Jotaro is. rarely talking much and just being an overall badass. Josuke's stand can fix and heal whatever it punches, representing how he doesn't really want to hurt people, and throughout his story, most of his enemies become friends. Kira's stand can turn anything it touches into a bomb, which is perfect for him, since he is a serial killer hiding amongst regular people. His power helps him blow up the evidence of his crimes. There's just so much creativity and cool stuff in JoJo's. The characters there are born with their stands, and they awaken at some random point of their lives, but not everybody has one. If someone in your family awakens a stand, everyone in the bloodline will awaken theirs as well. And there are also the stand arrow, which upon stabbing someone with it, will awaken the person's stand. Regular people cannot see stands, only those who have them can see them, but they can still feel it. If they get punched in the face by one, they will still get hurt, they just won't see what hit them. And you can already see how many rules there are in place for this power system, right? And I'm just getting started. There are a lot more. Like, for example, stand users tend to attract others geographically. This stand sustains damage, the same damage will happen to your body. The more distant you are from your stand, the weaker it gets, except if it's a special type of stand. And when you're watching the anime or just reading the manga, all of this is easy to memorize because it feels intuitive. It's not a bunch of rules you gotta write down to understand the story. It's just how you would expect punching ghosts to work, I guess. And that's the mark of a great power system. It feels intuitive for the casual reader, but has enough depth to keep the more enthusiastic fans nerding out at the stats, strengths and weaknesses of each stand. The best thing a power system like JoJo's has is that it can afford to have those big overwhelming villains appear with crazy powerful stands and just have them be defeated by the main character. Not because he magically got stronger and beat someone he couldn't before, but because he found a little flaw, a little exploit in the villain's power, or he found a creative new way of using his own powers. The same applies to the villains. They can suddenly win if they find a crazy new way of approaching the battle. It's all a lot of fun. For example, spoilers ahead for part 5. Diavolo's stand is incredibly powerful because it can skip a few moments to the future without anyone knowing or being able to react. Like in the blink of an eye, your ally is dead. How do you defeat something like that? Well, the characters found a way. By making a cut on their hands, they were able to use their own drops of blood to know whenever the enemy's power was being used. That's a big brain move. In a power system like that, any extremely powerful enemy can be defeated by good strategy and thinking, and any useless, weak stands can be powerful under the right circumstances. Like, how does a guy whose stand is a fishing rod fight someone who can open holes in anything and punch people real fast and hard? How can a guy with just a magic fishing rod fight that and almost win? That's JoJo for you, with a power system so goofy that it makes it almost impossible for the story to be affected by power creep. And speaking of it, what is power creep? Power creep is what happens when characters in manga and comics keep gaining more and more power over time. It's exciting at first to see heroes unlock new abilities, but this can also make previous threats seem weak and less significant. The stakes can feel like they're slipping away because the challenges don't match the character's escalating strength. So this is not a problem for well-balanced power systems, where the weakest character could beat the strongest under the right circumstances. But not everyone likes JoJo's power system, because it can get too unpredictable sometimes and the creator does have the habit of breaking or changing his own rules sometimes. So now let's talk about arguably the best, most complete power system in all of manga. In Hunter x Hunter or Hunter x Hunter, I still to this day don't know the right way of saying it, Nen is the power system. In it, you use your life energy, or aura, to do magic stuff. Everyone has aura, it's just your life force emanating from your body. But mastering it allows you to develop unique abilities. It's a big part of what makes the fight so engaging and dynamic. So here's a breakdown of Nen. There are different types of Nen abilities. Your class doesn't necessarily make it so you can only do one thing. It's just a way of classifying how you prefer to fight. Mastering Nen involves learning how to control your aura in different ways. You practice different techniques which embodies different aspects of your body and mind, and the combination of these techniques can be infinite. That's why Nen is regarded as the perfect power system. Every single power in fiction could be classified and replicated in Nen. It's like craft your own superpower using this power system. It has infinite potential for fans to nerd out all day, and the system just adds so much depth to the fights and character interactions in Hunter x Hunter. With it, every battle is a blend of strategy and power, as every shonen battle aspires to be. The beauty of Nen lies in how it allows characters to create and customize their abilities based on their own personal traits and preferences. This customization isn't just choosing cool powers or something that would seem overpowered. It also involves incorporating specific setbacks and limitations that add layers of strategies and realism to the story. Like, you couldn't create the ultimate power with no weaknesses. There's always a flaw in your power. You just gotta choose your own weaknesses, making it so each character's Nen really reflects their role in the story. Take Kurapika for example. Kurapika's abilities are tied to his status as a conjurer and his personal vendetta. He created chains that are activated by his intense emotions. He designed his Nen abilities specifically with revenge in mind, making it so he is incredibly strong when fighting his chosen targets, the members of the Phantom Troop who eliminated his entire clan, but has significant drawbacks when fighting someone else. If he tried using the chains on anyone who isn't a member of the Phantom Troop, he will die. This specificity in targets and dire consequences for using it wrong makes the ability extremely powerful against his chosen enemies. And just like that, each character's abilities reflect their personal motivations and background, adding depth to both their powers and their fights. But your power system doesn't have to be this detailed and complex. It can be as simple as you like. Just keep in mind that it has to be fun and interesting to use as a framework to speculate who wins against who. For our final example, let's talk about a simpler power system: My Hero Academia's Quirks. The power system in My Hero Academia are the Quirks. They are basically superpowers that most people in the manga's world are born with, and they can be anything from simple abilities to really complex ones. Quirks, unlike stands or Nen, are purely genetic. There is no rhyme or reason for the characters to have the powers they do. It doesn't necessarily reflect their personality. I mean, it kinda does, but that's more of a narrative thing, you know? There is no in-story reason for the powers to reflect the user's personality. You could say that the quirk the character was born with will shape their worldview, so it's not the power reflecting the character's personality, but the other way around. Izuku Midoriya, the main character, starts out without a quirk, which is a big deal in the world where everyone has one. But then he inherits the super powerful quirk One for All from All Might, the greatest hero. This quirk boosts his strength, speed and durability to insane levels, but since he was born without that power, Midoriya can't control it at first, and his body is not strong enough to wield it. So every time he uses it, he ends up hurting himself. As the story progresses, you see him learn to control and enhance his abilities, which is really about him growing up and becoming a true hero. That's a way of using a very basic power system in a creative way, because as I said before, a power system is a way to mechanize the story's themes. So if we applied that idea to My Hero, we could see that the story is the tale of someone who was born with a disadvantage but manages to achieve his dreams through sheer determination and force of will. And yes, I am ignoring the ending, as everyone should. Another great example from My Hero is Shoto Todoroki, who has the quirk half cold, half hot. It lets him control both ice and fire, which looks very cool. But Shoto's story is more complicated because his fire abilities remind him of his troubled relationship with his father, since he got the fire powers from him. His father, Endeavor, always wanted to be the #1 hero, and when he realized he wouldn't be able to, he decided that he had a second chance of achieving that dream through his son. So he married a woman specifically because of her ice power quirk in order to create a genetically gifted son with the abilities of both fire and ice. But because Endeavor was such an abusive husband and father, early on Todoroki refuses to use his fire side, relying only on his ice powers from his mother, which shows how much he's struggling internally. Watching him gradually accept both sides of his quirk is a huge part of his character's development. And then there's Bakugo, with his explosion quirk. Bakugo's quirk lets him create explosive blasts from his sweat, which is very disgusting now that I'm saying it out loud. And he uses it in all sorts of clever ways, like blasting himself through the air or overwhelming opponents in battle. His quirk perfectly matches his simple yet aggressive and competitive personality, making him one of the most intense characters in the series. Quirks are a good example of a power system that is more random but still works very well for the story it tells. And that's what makes a good power system. It is an extension of the story. It's like a way of telling the story in a more mechanical fashion and explaining the more complex themes in fights and dynamics, while also making the fights more interesting. A lot of people starting out making comics don't realize the nuances of power system and just creates whatever comes to mind. And then they don't know why their story feels janky and nobody cares about their system. There's gotta be a reason for your power system to exist, and it needs to be deeply connected to what's going on in the narrative. I have a Udemy and Skillshare course for writing webcomics, link is in the description, and all I can tell you now is keep learning, keep practicing, because the best is yet to come.